And I did say this on the prediction or in one of our prediction videos. I said Chicago figured out a way to shut down McDavid and Draisaitl when
You did
all
say
games
that.
were in Edmonton. Winnipeg will find a way when only half the games are in Edmonton. And I think this is more on Edmonton. I mean, obviously, when you have players like McDavid and Draisaitl, you want them on the ice as much as possible. But it gets to a point where they're on too much. And I think that last game where they lost, you could see that. Even though Winnipeg's players were gassed as well, I mean, look at Nurse, look at McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. By the end of that game, they could barely skate.
I mean, Nurse
And
played
who
like
blames
he played over 60 minutes, like that one game,
exactly?
the final
And
game, right?
he played really well. Like he played really well. But he could only play in his own end, Darnell Nurse. During the end of the game, he couldn't skate. He was exhausted. Where Winnipeg was actually shuffling lines. So I think that played a huge factor in Winnipeg actually beating the Jets, or beating the Oilers. Where with Montreal, you're not stopping a McDavid and Draisaitl, you're just trying to stop their whole team, and Winnipeg just couldn't do that.
To be fair, though, like the whole we figured out a way to stop McDavid. It was just kind of take advantage of him. Do you guys know how many penalties McDavid drew in that entire series? 0. Do you know how many penalties he's drawn in his last 3 series?
0, I'm guessing?
Yeah, 0. That's
Wow.
ridiculous. Yeah, last Chicago, not a single penalty called against a play against McDavid. So if the whole strategy of stop McDavid is just take 30 infractions against him that will never be called, at what point does the
they'll
NHL
be called in the
step
regular
in?
season.
Who cares? Who
That's
cares?
the thing that happens every year, though. That's always playoff hockey. You're going to hear my Canucks argument now about when Boston beat them. It's the same thing. That it always happens in playoffs. I'm not saying it makes the game better because I don't think it does. I agree with letting them play a little bit, but when it gets to the point where a fourth liner is so valuable now because they can just do whatever they want and not get a call, and the first line players are playing with all these injuries all the time anyway, that's not hockey in my opinion. So I do think that is ruining the game. They do need to make calls in the playoffs.
We finally have a player that's as interesting to watch as Wayne Gretzky. And every time you try to sell the sport to new fans, you're like, you got to watch the Oilers. We got a new guy like Gretzky. Unless it's the playoffs, then some fourth liner like Andrew Lowry or Kopp are going to just hook him and nothing will happen. Like, I think it's definitely killing the sport a bit, but at the same time, Sidney Crosby found a way to get around it, and there's no excuses for Edmonton in this, ending.
But I do want to segue this off up north into Edmonton. So we kind of touched on this a little bit before. This was kind of unbelievable, though, Edmonton to be out in the first round. I know one person in the chat here had Edmonton going right to the final. Actually, 2 had them going to the final. 1 had it winning the Stanley Cup. Boston, yikes! That was a hot take, and that was a pretty bad take. So, boys, like, what happened to Edmonton? And the biggest question here is how was Winnipeg able to shut down McJesus and Draisaitl, like, second year in a row? Like, how? Like, they were so dominant in the regular season, especially against Winnipeg, and then they just fell absolutely flat.
Well, they had the Andrew Kopp and Adam Lowry line, and they're a great two-way line that just stuck to McDavid and Draisaitl and gave them absolutely no room. That's basically it. And to take those guys out for 2 games, that's huge. Like, you're almost guaranteed the series if you can hold them to just 2 games with 0 points.
Right.
I mean, it's like I said earlier, if you take 30 infractions on a guy a game and none of them get called, you're going to win pretty easily. And I know,
was it that bad though? Like, I don't remember seeing anything like that bad. Like,
I wish I remember the username. I don't, but there's a Twitter account. If anyone in the comments remembers the name, put it down. Who he tracks infractions not called in playoff games, and the Winnipeg Edmonton series was like borderline criminal how high it was. And I understand, like, you can't blame the refs, but in a series where every game was decided by 1 goal. A power play when you have the 2 best players in the league absolutely makes a difference. Like, 1 power play in any of those games could have won Edmonton the game and changed the tide.
And could we talk about depth? I'm sorry, I just see this on my screen here, and you know who was number 3 for points? I guess tied for number 3 in points for the playoffs? Zach Kassian. Yes. Like, you have Draisaitl at 5 points, McDavid at 4 points, and then you have 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and then nothing. Like,
and that's what I was saying when I made my prediction on the podcast. I said, if you shut down that one line, they don't have much after.
It's not even a
And
line, JJ. It's 2/3 of a line because it's two or three
exactly,
players.
exactly. And like in that last game, especially, you'd see Nuge's line go on, and then just like that, they're off the ice again. And you'd see McDavid and Draisaitl out there, and the Jets would go through 2 to 3 lines sometimes, and they'd still be out there.
So let
Well,
me
they're
ask
not
this
going to be playing
question.
their best if they're exhausted every shift.
We talked
Yeah, and
about
just
like
to add on to
oh, go
sorry,
ahead,
just to
Connor.
add on to JJ's point there, those like McDavid was exhausted during some of those shifts. Twice in like games 3 and game 4, he had a major turnover that directly led to either the game tying goal for the Jets to force overtime or led to the game winning goal that closed the series. The dude was exhausted. He couldn't do anymore.
And when you're tired, you make mistakes. You throw the puck away maybe too early, or you throw it a bit too far away. You're not thinking correctly. And that shows. Edmonton has zero depth, and that's why I didn't have any faith in them against the Jets on the
That
podcast.
was
My fantasy pool was a bit different.
100% the difference maker. You're right. When you're losing by one game and like so many of them go in overtime, all it takes is one bad turnover, like you're saying, and that's it. You're down, right? So
Yeah, I mean, it also doesn't help that some of those saves in overtime could have been there, but definitely weren't.
Mike Smith wasn't bad though. Like
He was good.
He wasn't bad, but like there was
He had
one
a 9-1-2
costly
save
I'm not
goal.
putting it on
percentage. Like
Smithy.
honestly, like when I was watching it, he gave them a chance to win every single game, like without fail.
I was so hard on Smith last year when they lost to Chicago. That different Smith this year. He looked great. You can't put this on Smith.
No, I'm not saying the series is on him. There's just one bad goal that I think it was a game tying goal that was really bad on Smith, but that was about it.
It
I
happens
think you
to
might be
everyone.
thinking of the Kyle Connor winner, though, where did go under his arm. But yeah, like when it's 1 goal games like that, and you have the best player in the world on your team, that's unexcusable. Like that team should win 1 game at least. You can't throw that on your goalie playing pretty well and go, oh, we didn't win 1 game. It's Mike Smith's fault.